Hi guys, welcome back to the KUNA High School 1 2020 podcast. I'm here with Colin Roark, your Secretary General.
How's it going, everyone? It's good to be here. Glad to be presenting over High School KUNA 1.
And it's good to be able to sit down with you. We just came back from the press conference where you answered a bunch of questions from us on the Media Corps team and the Instagram live feed. And one thing that you mentioned during that conversation was how interested you are in artificial intelligence. And I can tell by the way you were talking about it, you want to discuss that a little bit more. So you said it would play a big role in the future and that it would sort of be a security risk eventually. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
Definitely. For one, I think artificial intelligence can take several forms, not just robots, simulated humans, but all sorts of things from computer programs that can simulate humans to different cybersecurity threats. Like right now, China, their new social credit system, it's not quite artificial intelligence, but some really advanced algorithm to track its citizens and spy on them. It's getting close to an episode of Black Mirror, if you all are familiar with that. And I think artificial intelligence can really have a big role in automation. That was another thing I mentioned, as more and more people start having their jobs taken away by machines because this artificial intelligence is advancing and progressing really rapidly. It's going to be something we're going to have to deal with in the future, and we're already starting to see some of the beginning results of that.
And that is a very important concern. Do you have any solutions in mind?
Right now, I don't have one particular solution. I think we need to start talking about it, start bringing this issue higher up on the hierarchy of issues we care about. In all the presidential debates this year, I would have liked to have seen more questions about artificial intelligence and how these presidential candidates would want to respond to that. I also think we don't need to be afraid of it necessarily, but we need to recognize that it's happening. Because if we attempt to stop it, that's only going to help the people who are probably going to do something harmful with it. If we do it responsibly and progress carefully, knowing what we're going to do, I think we can use it to our advantage. So those are some of the ideas I have on it right now. There's no one good solution to it. I think it's a very complex and multi-layered issue that's going to take a lot of thought, and we're going to actually have to come together if we want to fix it.
Speaking of that hierarchy of issues you mentioned, what are some other topics that are important to you?
I think homelessness is definitely one, and the heroin epidemic. One, because of some service I've done in downtown Louisville, and you just kind of see the effects of that firsthand. And it's tough seeing people living under bridges and just asking for anything they can. But it's also tough seeing the needles on the ground beside them. So you kind of have a conflict in your, when you're in your thought process. I want to help these people, right? I want to get them off the streets and help them live a better life, but at the same time, there's heroin needles there. They're on heroin, so we want to help with that too, obviously. But there's always that debate of, well, should we help them like they did this to themselves? And I think we should help them, but maybe it's not quite as direct as someone just living on the street and trying to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. There's rehabilitation and several different things, and those are some issues I care about, and that's why I've done different forms of service to kind of help those people.
Do you want to talk about some of those service opportunities?
Yeah. One of the big ones I've done that I've really enjoyed is called Burrito Riders. It's in downtown Louisville. Friday nights with my youth group, we would all pitch in to buy different ingredients for burritos, so, like salsa, cheese, ground beef, whatever that may be, and then make the burritos Friday night, wrap them, put them in the oven, heat them up in tinfoil, or not tinfoil, just heat them up, and then the next day we would get up early Saturday morning and ride around bikes in downtown Louisville and just hand them out to anyone on the street who needed a hot meal. And it's a really good way to give back to people directly and really kind of see the effects of your service, because you can see how grateful they are. And a lot of these times people are way more grateful than we are because we take so many of these things for granted.
For sure. Do you want to do a quick recap of your part in the human rights simulation?
Sure. So the human rights simulation was something we all worked on a lot. First of all, took a lot of work, and I'm really proud of how it went. So my part, I talked about Venezuela specifically. I think this is important because there's a lot of human rights violations going on there, and too often they can be overlooked by people on both sides of the political party trying to make a point about socialism, communism, corrupt politicians, whatever that may be. So it becomes a talking point, and people forget about what's actually going on there. They forget about the people who are actually living those conditions. So I think it's important to remind everyone that, we can have this debate about socialism, about what the government's role is and all this, about sanctions, about inflation, about foreign aid, all these things. We can have that debate. But it's important to remember there are very real results from that. And these people have to live with what we decide. So it's important to think about the poverty there, the starvation, the lack of clean water, lack of power, all the refugee crisis. And that's really why I chose Venezuela, and I wanted to draw attention to that issue.
It was a very amazing display. What are your favorite memories from KUNA and the Y?
From KUNA and the Y. I touched on this in my press conference, but I think sophomore year, being a resolution sponsor, that was really one of the first experiences I had being more involved in the Y, and then getting endorsed by the Secretary General at that time was amazing. We had no idea we would get that, and when we did, we were all ecstatic. Our room was going crazy that night. It's this is a big deal, and we're only sophomores too. So that's one of my favorite memories up there. Another favorite memory would be when I got elected Secretary General. Nothing can really come close to that feeling. I was sitting with my delegation, shaking. I was so nervous. And then I heard my name called out. Stood up. My brother was right beside me. And he's actually here now as a sophomore. Just gave him a big hug, ran up to the stage, and got my gavel. And that was such an incredible feeling, seeing the results of my work and my campaign pay off, because I spent every day trying to talk to new people, trying to sit at new tables, and that feeling, there's nothing like it, honestly. And then the mixer has always been a great memory. It's always been fun going out there with my friends and my delegation and just having a good time, because I love debate. I love debating and love all the stuff we do here. But it's nice just to kind of have an outlet for all the pent-up energy we all have. And that really manifests in the mixer and this year's Silent Disco, which still very excited for. At KY, it was a great time. Also, I recommend just taking off the headphones and just looking at everyone for a second and just realizing how silly it is for anyone coming in, because it's hilarious. And it's so odd, but I think that's what makes it so special too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is a lot of the Y.
Yes, so many things about the Y that are just to anyone else who's not a part of it, it looks silly or just like a cult or something. But we all know it's different because we've actually been there and we've seen how much fun it is.
So one of the things that you're obviously very passionate about is meeting new people and putting yourself out there. Can you tell us a little bit why that's so important to you?
Probably because I think going into high school, I came from a really small grade school, and going into freshman year, I didn't really know a whole lot of people. And freshman year, I kind of regret not putting myself out there more. I was more shy than I should have been, and I regret that looking back now. So I want to make sure I don't have any regrets now, that especially now that I'm closing out my high school career. And I would just want to enjoy the experience as much as I can. And part of the way to do that is meet as many people as I can, because I really just want to get to know everyone. And I don't want to have any regrets because there's so many good people out there. And I just want to get to know them.
Do you have anything that you really, really want to do later on in life?
I want to start my own company. I think I've really always wanted to do that. And probably do that with engineering. That's what I want to major in. I've known that for a while. But own my own business, that's something I've always wanted to do. be in charge of my own company, like run it myself, and then also use that to have some impact on the world. Like I do want to be able to leave my mark somehow, and I think one way I can do that is through some company that does make change in the community and the state and the world. And then, maybe one day run for office. Like that's always been something in the back of my mind, but we'll see what happens.
So, last question. What is the best way to close out this KUNA?
Best way to close out this KUNA? Best way would probably be just not to close that at all. Just to keep it going as long as we can. But if we have to, I don't know. I think if we can just leave here with no regrets, if everyone is satisfied with how they did, well, not exactly how they did, but satisfied that they gave their best effort and they got out of it as much as they wanted to, then I think we can close it out however we want, and people will still be satisfied. I'll try to give as good a speech as I can. I've got that written, and hopefully you all like it. And hopefully it does a good job of summing up the conference and how we're all feeling. But if you all leave here with no regrets and inspired by what you've seen, then I think the conference did exactly what it was supposed to. So
I'm sure it'll be great.
I hope so too.
Thank you so much again for coming on. And we'll be back to hear from more bill authors and the Deputy Secretary General. For now, listen to this ad.
Did you download the TikTok app as a joke and now you're addicted? Do you spend hours a day watching people do ridiculous nonsense? Do you live in the state of Kentucky? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you should most certainly check out the KYYMCA TikTok account, where your fellow delegates do random nonsense.
Welcome back to the High School 1 KUNA 2020 podcast. I'm Audrey Spillman. This is Aaron Kane, here to talk about one of the most interesting resolutions so far at this conference. So, would you like to talk about your bill?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so our bill is talking about decreasing dynamite fishing in the Philippines, which will ultimately, hopefully, inspire other countries to decrease their dynamite fishing as well. Dynamite fishing is the use of, explosives. So basically, people in the Philippines are illegally creating bombs in plastic water bottles, which is kind of funny because plastic being thrown into the ocean is already, polluting our oceans. So when they cast out the water bottles with the bombs go off, and anything, I believe, to a 30 to 100-foot radius gets, goes off and it explodes. So let's say, they cast and it wasn't far enough, it could ultimately, harm them. It's killed many people using the dynamite fishings. And then it kills, schools of fish, and when the dynamite goes off, it bleaches coral reefs, which is, suffocating the air and, killing the plants and the coral reefs. And, overall, the coral reefs are, already, decreasing so much. All the vibrant colors in schools of fish are already, being killed, so easily and dynamite fishing just makes it worse.
So what were your and the other bill authors' motivation for writing this resolution specifically?
Well, we knew we wanted to do something about water because that's a really big issue right now in global warming and climate change and all of that. And so while we were just thinking about what we wanted to do, we were thinking about water, and then we were also thinking about the Philippines. And we saw that one of the major things was dynamite fishing and how much it affects ecosystems and coral reefs and fish and populations in general. So we knew that we wanted to do something to help the water and the pollution in the oceans and all of that in general. And so we saw dynamite fishing and we were this is a big issue with all of the dynamite and the carbon and everything, because it affects coastal developments, fishing in general, oceans in general, pollution, climate change, everything.
So in the Philippines, how frequent is dynamite fishing?
It's very frequent because a lot of people, I'm not sure if they're just wanting to sell it or use it for themselves, but fishing is big. Fish is what they mostly eat in the Philippines. So I don't know if they want to sell it, but when you do dynamite fishing, it kills large groups of fish, and so it's easier than individually fishing. But it's so much more harmful to the ecosystems and themselves.
So what is the specific solution that this resolution?
So our resolution is wanting to raise the fines because it's only at like 5,000 pesos. So we want to raise the fines and also the prison time. And there's, in a certain area in the Philippines, it's called Bunadito. There's like 1,300 acres of water, and there's only 4 police boats. So it's so easy for someone to go dynamite fish and not get caught. So we also want to increase police boats for like security in the oceans.
All right. Is there any other sort of standout message that this resolution is supposed to give off?
I think ultimately it's just trying to show people that there's an easier way to do things instead of harming our oceans. Because a lot of people are like, oh, like it's one water bottle in the ocean, like it's fine, but they don't realize how much that can build up and how much it's like harming our environment and our oceans and all. And there's sea turtles and dolphins and fish and everything in the ocean, and they don't really know. Like, so if there's like a plastic water bottle or those things that go around cans, I don't know what it's called, but they like hold the cans together, and those can get stuck around dolphins' noses, and it can get stuck around fins, and it's just like so easy to like kill everything in our ocean. I don't think people realize how easy it is for that.
So in the bill, you also mentioned that some of the money left over from increasing policing will go to proper equipment for fishermen. Mm-hmm. What was the inspiration for that aspect of the bill?
Well, we knew that the more people weren't able to dynamite fish, the more it could like harm their families if like they don't get enough food, or harm their like jobs if they don't sell enough fish. But we want them to know that there's a better way of doing this. So giving them money for adequate fishing supplies will be so much better than them like creating bombs themselves and using them. So we just thought that would be such an easier way, and it would give back something to them, so we're not just taking.
Thank you again so much for coming on. This bill is certainly one of the more interesting ones that I've read, and I think it's very important. So we'll leave you with those final food for thought, and we'll come back again to hear from Madison, our Deputy Secretary General.
For the latest news and posts, follow KYYMCA Media on Instagram. You'll see lots of good pictures of everyone from the conference and some posts on the stories as well. And be on the lookout for the end of the conference slideshow from our awesome media team, and also the video that we'll have put together from the broadcast team. And yeah, that's it. Okay. Yeah, that was good.
Welcome back to the High School 1 KUNA 2020 podcast. I'm here with your Deputy Secretary General, Madison, who I would like to ask, what's the process of the new NGO?
So the NGO and Secretariat program has been around for a while, but this is the first year that it's ever been like fully fledged. And so the program is headed by me and Colin, the SecGen. And there are like layers, so there are 7 Secretariat members, each of which represent one branch of the UN. So we have 2 legal affairs, which work closely with the ICJ, that make sure any resolution that gets passed is legal in its standings. And then the other 5 branches, like peace building and peace operations, resolutions and NGOs fall under them that have to do with that branch of the UN. And the NGOs themselves, if you're in the NGO program, you get to select any non-governmental organization that you want to represent. There's a huge database, and you essentially select something that you're super passionate about. And then after you select your NGO, you write testimony on resolutions regarding your NGO, and excuse me. And you get to deliver those in ranking committees. So if you know anything about the lobbyist program at KYA, it's similar to that. They sort of act as lobbyists. And so they speak in ranking committees, and then in voting committees they're technically not allowed to speak, but that's when they're giving out talking points. And then our NGOs will meet with whatever Undersecretary General or the USG that their resolution falls a part of. So, for example, if your NGO had to do with human trafficking, you would probably fall under the Humanitarian Affairs USG. So then you have a meeting about the resolution, and then one NGO from each of those meetings is sent to talk to me, and then I select 2 or 3, I think, that go directly to Colin to deliver their testimony to see why he should endorse or not endorse the resolutions that get passed.
So can you give me a few examples of NGOs from this conference?
One of them is Oxfam International. There's Human Trafficking Resources, the World Wildlife Fund. It's pretty diverse, and I think that's why I like the program so much, is because it gives you a lot of freedom to do something that you're passionate about, and it allows you to speak in a different way than just being a regular ambassador, because they have like a set speaking time that they're allowed to speak when nobody else is. So it gives you a chance to speak on something that you're super passionate about that you might not have had otherwise.
Cool. So could you give us a quick recap of your part of the human rights simulation?
So my part of human rights simulation had to do a lot with public health and vaccination. It's something that I'm really, really passionate about, because I just believe that every person has the right to live a healthy life. And especially concerning vaccination, there are countries that don't have as much access, and there are individuals that physically cannot get vaccinated if they have compromised immune systems for whatever reason. And so I think it's just really important as a global community to really emphasize access and education, because without access, it doesn't matter if they're educated, because they can't get to it. But there are some nations in underdeveloped countries that they're not educated enough on vaccines to be able to understand the positive effects of them. So they may have the access, but they don't have a proper education that shows them, hey, this does a good thing, because they don't comprehend that because nobody's telling them that. So we have to increase access and education to make sure, like, for example, coronavirus, right? Everybody's making a huge deal of coronavirus because we don't have anything to fix it. And we have vaccines to fix polio, for example. But a polio outbreak could very easily start again if vaccination continues to decrease like it is right now.
Let's move on to some of the resolutions that you like from this conference. Would you like to speak about any of those?
There were 3 that I found super duper interesting. One of them is about reforming the Security Council, which I don't even know if they're allowed to do that, but it was a really interesting concept, and I just liked the way the resolution, it was very well laid out, and I really liked that it kind of forced you to think about a different program area that you're not a part of. Because as a regular ambassador, if you've never done Security Council, you might not quite understand what they're doing, but that resolution gives you like a peek into it without like throwing you totally in. And then there was one about using the Chernobyl tourism in Ukraine in order to give money back to the government in order to heighten their like cleanliness of water, because they have a water problem. And I thought that was super interesting. I just thought it was a really creative way to kind of work that back together. And then there was another one,
the withdrawal process.
Yes, it giving nations an opportunity to withdraw from the UN, because right now after you join you aren't allowed to leave. Like after you're in the UN you're stuck. And there was an example, Indonesia tried to withdraw, and because they didn't get to withdraw, a coup d'etat overthrew their entire government, and there was a huge rebellion. And so I just think it's important for national autonomy purposes to give that outlet to escape without having the entire international community blackmail you, because that's essentially what it provides right now.
Are there any specific topics, especially the ones that we're discussing at this conference, that mean a lot to you that we haven't been able to talk about yet?
We haven't. The other thing that I'm really passionate about is climate change, which I haven't been able to talk about it very much yet, but I know that there are a lot of people that are super passionate about it here, and it just gives me a lot of hope to see from our generation that not only, because it's science, people are well, you don't believe in it, but it's it's a scientific fact. So it gives me a lot of hope to see our generation kind of speaking out about it and laying out ideas and things that we can do to fix it, because it's a real problem. And if we don't do something, then there's not going to be any room for anybody else to do anything. So it gets me really excited to see, like, the type of activism that this conference brings.
Good, nice. Thank you again so much for coming on to this and being a part of the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And I look forward to hearing your speeches in the closing. And thank you for listening to the High School 1 KUNA 2020 podcast. We'll see you at the next one.